At 0900 hours, the telemetry was perfect. $100 million of stealth engineering was screaming across the Pacific, controlled by a pilot with 10 years of combat experience and reflexes honed to the millisecond. Then, at 0902, the data stream ended in a catastrophic impact. The official report blamed spatial disorientation. They called it a glitch in the pilot's internal gyroscope. A biological failure. But they never looked at the biology. They checked the fuel for contaminants. They checked the hydraulics for pressure drops. But they didn't check the blood for the silent variable that had been introduced into the pilot's diet 6 hours prior. The investigation ended at the cockpit, but the kill chain started in the mess hall. It started with a genetically modified organism that shouldn't exist in nature, served on a plastic tray, disguised as a harmless fillet of salmon. You have to understand the physiology of a fighter pilot. When you are pulling 9 Gs in a turn, your brain is the only avionics package that matters. It requires a precise chemical balance to maintain the OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, act. That loop relies on specific lipids, specific proteins, and the rapid firing of synapses protected by healthy myelin sheaths. For decades, the military relied on natural sources to fuel this biological machine. Wild-caught fish. Omega-3 fatty acids. The building blocks of cognitive speed. But that standard has been quietly replaced by an imposter. Enter the AquAdvantage salmon. This isn't a fish, it is a patented biological product. In nature, a salmon grows seasonally. It rests. It develops muscle and fat in a rhythm dictated by millions of years of evolution. The GMO variant is different. Scientists spliced a growth hormone gene from a Chinook salmon and a promoter sequence from an ocean pout, an eel-like bottom feeder, into the Atlantic salmon's genome. The result is a creature that never stops growing. It effectively stays in a permanent state of physiological overdrive, reaching market size in half the time of a natural fish. Here is where the biology turns into a weapon. The official FDA approval claims this fish is compositionally equivalent to the real thing. But equivalent is a bureaucratic term, not a physiological one. When you force an organism to grow at unnatural speeds, you alter the density and the quality of the nutrients it provides. You are creating a protein structure built on rushed cellular division. The research on this is practically non-existent, and that is the most terrifying part. There is zero data on how long-term consumption of this hypergrowth protein affects the cognitive performance of a human operating under extreme physiological stress. We know that in the civilian population, fish intake correlates with brain health. But we aren't talking about civilians sitting at desks. We are talking about operators in high-altitude, high-pressure environments where a millisecond of synaptic delay is the difference between a successful sortie and a crater. If the lipid profile of this GMO salmon is even slightly different, if the bioavailability of those essential fatty acids is compromised by the artificial growth cycle, then we are feeding our pilots a placebo. We are giving them food that looks like fuel but burns dirty. The cognitive load of a modern cockpit is insurmountable without perfect neurological function. By introducing a genetically modified variable into the food supply, the military has introduced a latency into the pilot's brain. It's a chemical lag. A microsecond delay in processing visual stimuli. And in the air, that delay is fatal. The silence in the medical literature isn't proof of safety, it is proof of negligence. They haven't tested this on pilots because they don't want to know the answer. They are treating the human brain as a legacy component that doesn't need an upgrade, even as they swap out its fuel source for a cheap, lab-grown alternative. Why would they take this risk? Why replace a proven nutritional source with a genetic experiment? The answer is always on the spreadsheet. The Defense Logistics Agency, or DLA, manages a food supply chain that spans the globe. We serve millions of meals a day. The logistics of getting fresh, wild-caught protein to a base in the northern Mariana Islands or a carrier group in the South China Sea are a nightmare of spoilage, transport costs, and cold chain management. This is where the firm fixed-price contract becomes a weapon. The military awards these massive subsistence contracts, worth hundreds of millions of dollars, to the companies that can guarantee the lowest price per plate while meeting the minimum technical specifications. The DIBS system, the DLA Internet Bid Board system, is an auction house for the lowest bidder. Natural salmon is expensive. It is seasonal. It is unpredictable. GMO salmon is a factory product. It can be grown in land-based tanks anywhere in the world, independent of ocean cycles. It grows twice as fast, which means it consumes less feed to reach harvest weight. For a defense contractor operating on thin margins, this fish is the holy grail of cost reduction. It represents a massive efficiency gain in the supply chain. By switching to the fast-growing GMO variant, a supplier can undercut the competition by pennies on the dollar. Across a 5-year contract worth $435 million, those pennies add up to a fortune. The motive isn't to kill pilots, the motive is to balance the budget. The system is designed to reward efficiency, not cognitive superiority. The domestic non-availability loopholes in the Berry Amendment allow the DoD to bypass domestic sourcing requirements when products aren't available in sufficient quantity or quality. This creates the perfect backdoor for these engineered foods to enter the supply chain under the guise of availability. They aren't choosing the best fuel for the pilot, they are choosing the most scalable logistics solution for the quartermaster. This is the brutal calculus of military contracting. A single F-35 costs over $80 million. The training for the pilot costs another $10 million. Yet, the system risked both assets to save a fraction of 8% on the catering budget. They have weaponized the supply chain against their own personnel, prioritizing the fiscal performance of the contract over the biological performance of the warfighter. It is an act of bureaucratic sabotage, hidden behind the complexity of a multi-tiered procurement system that no one looks at until the wreckage is already burning on the runway. The perfect crime isn't one where you hide the body. It's one where you hide the weapon inside the victim, and then convince the world the weapon doesn't exist. This is exactly what is happening in the mess halls and the investigation rooms. The most dangerous part of this supply chain shift isn't just the introduction of a genetically modified organism, it is the systematic erasure of your ability to detect it. It starts with the label. Or rather, the lack of one. Under the current federal labeling standards, the bioengineered disclosure that you might see on a grocery store package has a massive, calculated loophole. It does not apply to food served in restaurants, cafeterias, or, crucially, military dining facilities. When a pilot sits down for their pre-flight meal, that salmon fillet looks exactly like the wild-caught Atlantic salmon they've eaten for years. There is no warning. There is no informed consent. The pilot consumes the modified protein believing it is natural fuel, unaware they are ingesting a patented genetic construct. The evidence of the switch is scrubbed before the fork even touches the tray. But the cover-up goes deeper than a missing sticker. It extends into the crash investigation itself. When a jet goes down, the toxicology screen is rigid. It is a checklist designed in the 1980s. They look for alcohol. They look for amphetamines. They look for carbon monoxide. They do not look for abnormal protein folding or growth hormone variants. You cannot find what you are not looking for. The standard military autopsy protocols are completely blind to the subtle physiological shifts caused by long-term consumption of novel proteins. The medical examiners are working with a map that doesn't include this territory. Even if an investigator suspected the diet, they would hit a legal brick wall. The genetic sequence of the Aquad Vantage salmon is not public property, it is intellectual property. The specific modifications, the promoter sequences, and the exact cellular expression data are trade secrets owned by the Biotechnology Corporation. To prove that the fish caused a cognitive deficit, an independent lab would need access to the proprietary genetic data to run a comparison. But that data is protected by the same laws that protect weapons blueprints. The FDA's recent move toward enforcement discretion for low-risk gene-edited products essentially allows these companies to self-police. They tell the government it's safe, the government stamps it low risk, and the file is closed. The military hides behind this certification. If the pilot crashes, it's pilot error. It's never the safe, FDA-approved food. The evidence is effectively classified by copyright law. When you strip away the bureaucratic language in the proprietary shields, the picture becomes terrifyingly clear. We have a clear motive, a multi-billion-dollar supply chain desperate to cut costs. We have the weapon, a genetically modified organism that prioritizes rapid growth over nutritional integrity, introduced into a high-performance environment with zero long-term cognitive testing. And we have the cover-up, a legal framework that exempts military cafeterias from labeling and protects the genetic data as a trade secret. You don't need a leaked memo to see the truth. You just need to look at the pattern. The military has traded the biological reliability of its pilots for the fiscal efficiency of its contracts. They aren't trying to crash planes. They just don't care enough to stop it. They have calculated that the cost of an occasional unexplained spatial disorientation crash is lower than the cost of overhauling the entire food logistics system. The crash wasn't an accident. It was a transaction. And until this supply chain is exposed, every meal served on base is a game of Russian roulette. If you want to see the documents on the enforcement discretion policies and the supply chain contracts, check the description. Don't let them bury this. Share the video.